Winter in northern Canada had always been a harsh test. Temperatures plunged to -30, the wind cut through everything, snow piled high, and the roads were icy. In the small town of just over 1,000 people, winter meant one thing: struggle. There was no subway, no convenient buses from the city. Children who had to go to school every day had to walk. 2 kilometers through snowdrifts and wind became a real ordeal. Emily, a 26-year-old woman, worked as a mechanic at the local service shop. She was born and raised in this town, had finished school here, and remembered perfectly how children used to be picked up by the yellow school bus. The old Bluebird conventional was the only vehicle that saved them during winter. Inside, it was always warm. The driver would turn on the heater, and the ride became a little adventure rather than a punishment. But a few years ago, the bus broke down for good. The engine gave out, the body had rusted, and repairs were far too expensive for the town's limited budget. They simply rolled it behind the school building and left it there. That's where it sat, peeling, rusted, with flat tires, and utterly forgotten. One evening, Emily was walking home from work. She carried a bag of tools, her fingers numb from the cold. Near the school, she noticed a familiar sight: a dozen children bundled up in jackets walking through the snow. 2 young girls, elementary students, were crying so cold that even their mittens offered no relief. Emily stopped. Her heart tightened. Memories of her own childhood flooded back the very same bus, yellow and loud, that picked them up from home every day. Inside, it had been warm, smelling of diesel and old plastic, and most importantly, they hadn't had to walk through the snow. She walked a little further and saw it. The bus, covered in rust, snow-laden, with shattered windows. It seemed completely dead. But at that very moment, a thought sparked in her mind, making her heart race. What if I try to restore it? Emily stepped closer and ran her hand over the peeling paint. The metal was cold, but under her palm, she felt more than just a heap of iron. She felt memories. "You're still going to ride," she whispered. That evening, she got home and couldn't sleep. The idea wouldn't let go. Yes, it was crazy. Yes, no one in town would believe that a girl could resurrect the bus on her own. But inside her burned a stubborn determination. She knew one thing for certain: the children deserved warmth. Emily started small. She had access to tools and a garage at the service shop where she worked. On weekends and in the evenings, she would go to the bus and start dismantling it. The first thing she did was remove the seats and check the floor. Some areas of the metal had rotted and would need welding. The wiring was in terrible shape and would have to be completely replaced. The engine, it was simply gone. When the bus was decommissioned, the motor had been removed for parts. This became the biggest challenge. She found an online seller who promised to get a nearly new diesel engine for this model. The price was steep, but she gathered all her savings, took a side job in a nearby town, and sent the money. 2 weeks passed, nothing. Another week and only a short message: "Sorry, the engine is sold." The money was gone. Emily sat on the cold garage floor and broke down for the first time. It felt like she had been cheated and that the whole project had collapsed. But something inside her refused to give up. She remembered the children freezing every day and stubbornly got back on her feet. "All right," she told herself, wiping her tears. "I'll find another one." Through mechanic acquaintances, she got in touch with a salvage yard in Montreal. There, an old but working engine awaited. It needed a complete overhaul, but it was better than nothing. She drove there herself, rented a trailer, and brought the motor back to the town. The work took months. She spent nights in the garage, her hands cracked and covered in grease, her back aching so much that sometimes she couldn't straighten up. The cold bit through to her bones. The garage had poor heating. But every bolt, every part, was a step forward. The neighbors laughed. "Why do you want that coffin? It will never run." Even colleagues at the service shop shook their heads. But Emily gritted her teeth even tighter. She repaired the rotted floor, repainted the body, and installed new windows. She refurbished the interior, reupholstered the seats herself. She rewired everything and set up the lighting. Finally, it was time to install the engine. It was the hardest day. The motor weighed half a ton, and without a crane, it was nearly impossible. She called 2 acquaintances who helped lift it inside. Several hours were spent just securing it on the mounts. When everything was ready, the day of the first start arrived. Emily sat behind the wheel, the ignition key trembling in her hands. Her heart was racing. She turned the key, the starter clicked, the engine coughed, smoke puffed from the exhaust, but within a second, it stalled. She tried again and again. On the 5th attempt, the engine suddenly came to life. It hummed deeply, unevenly, but steadily. The garage filled with the sound, and tears ran down Emily's face. The bus was breathing again. The work took almost 3 months. During that time, she lost weight, her face grew pale, but inside, she felt a deep satisfaction. Every day, the bus came closer and closer to life. And then, one morning, it was ready. Fresh yellow paint gleamed in the frost, the windows sparkled, and the wheels looked brand new. Inside, the cabin was clean, smelling of new upholstery. Emily started the engine. It ran smoothly, confidently. She drove out of the garage and headed toward the school. When the bus approached the schoolyard, the children were huddled together as usual, preparing for their morning walk through the snow. But suddenly, they heard a familiar hum and turned around. The yellow bluebird slowly came to a stop before them, shining as if it were new. The children screamed with delight. Teachers stepped out of the school, many unable to believe their eyes. Yesterday's rusty skeleton stood before them alive again. Emily opened the doors. One by one, the children climbed inside, touching the seats, laughing. In their eyes was a joy that could not be faked. An elderly teacher who had known Emily since she was a student approached her with tears. "You did the impossible." Emily just smiled. The town would remember that day for a long time. The bus was carrying children again, and Emily had proven that even a single person could change the life of an entire village. Her hands were scarred, her back still ached, but inside she felt that every night spent in the cold garage had been worth it. The bus drove on, and the children waved from its windows, and those who had laughed and said, "It'll never work," were silent at that moment. Emily knew she had won.